Hello, and welcome to the Razuni Broadcasting Channel, bringing you the news about the Razuni Sultanate and Eldham. First, we'll be talking about the news within the Sultanate. Second, will be the news about the whole world of Eldham. And last of all, will be the changes to the borders of the world. First up, we have a brief history of a religion called Ratism, and the nation it originated from, called Ratlantis. For those of you who don't know what Ratism is, here's a short summary. Ratism is a religion led by its leader, the Rat King, not to be confused with the Rat King of the Rat Ring, which is completely unrelated. Now, Ratism is hated for two reasons. Number one, they dropped TNT, which lagged the server. And number two, their leader, Electric Rat, has been very unprofessional to whom he calls heretics. Roughly a week before the 25th of August, 2021, the Confederation of This, also known as the COG, found the town of Ratlantis, built on two sides of a river that bordered one of Raven Guard's northeastern provinces, and what was previously Bear River, a state in COG. A group of 5 members of COG met up with them and requested that they stop building on COG land. After some diplomacy, an agreement was made with Ratlantis, as they would pay $15,000, and keeping their land on COG's side, and not expanding any farther. However, that was then reconsidered, and the Ratists decided to tear down the buildings on the COG's side of the river. A few days later, it was noticed by the Ratists that it appeared that the COG were selling the Ratists coordinates for $30,000 each, leading one member, Zero, to reach out to their president, Buyuyo, to ask why the COG was not upholding one part of the agreement, not mentioning Ratlantis at all. It had turned out that the COG was forcing any entity to pay $30,000 before attempting to raid them, because they were on COG land. It was assumed by Zero that they were attempting to get them to join the COG, which eventually succeeded in doing so. During that conversation, Bayuyo offered to give them a city/state, and after a day, they abandoned the city and moved into the Bear River state. Currently, there is just one city dedicated to Ratism, and 2 holy sites being built. Ratlantis was not the end of Ratism as a whole, just a part of it. Next up, throughout the entire world, there is a mass banditry taking place due to an experiment with the Overlord, Stony, that had gone badly. The cost of everything stolen by people joining towns for the sole purpose of robbing them and then leaving the towns afterwards. Many countries have been robbed, due to many nations sending complaints about the situation, which first began with the removal of the No Stealing Law. The law was implemented just one day after all the robberies have been done again, but the damage has already been done. Many cities have not only been robbed, but also in some way briefed.
This also included the capital of the Razuni Sultanate. In the city, many players lost items due to the lack of area protections. Luckily, there was enough evidence that the thief had indeed used X-ray or other cheats, with which he was able to find not only hidden chests, but also secret places underneath the capital. A player called the Buzzer has mined directly into the directions of the different chests. The Buzzer caused damages totaling a minimum value of $750,000. Since the Buzzer and his friend Jabestia both engaged in mass theft, the Sultanate is issuing a warning to its citizens and those abroad not to interact with these individuals due to their actions. But not only the capital of the Sultanate was involved. The real damage in height of at least $2 million was done when a robbery took place in the city of San Conoco, whose owner is one of the founders of the RBC, Big Kahuna. Kahuna started complaining about the robbery while everyone was already glad that the items of the Buzzer would get returned to the nation. Since the previous thief had not even been trusted in San Conoco, the situation was very confusing. Kahuna started removing inactive citizens he had not recently had contact with in order to remove any possibility of future thefts. One of those was a player called Caprone24, who not only had permissions in the city, but also in the cities of Ashburg and Volkatsi. Upon further investigation, Kahuna removed a player named Kenele, who sent him a text in which he accused Caprone24, the guy who Kahuna had already removed from stealing the items. He guaranteed that Caprone had told him so because he is a friend of his. Suddenly, Kenele had not only accused Caprone, but another individual, an RBC team member, Lewis, of hiding the items. Since all three of them were Romanian, many believed there to be a connection, and a massive investigation was started against Caprone24 and Lewis. During the investigation, the Sultanate put pressure on Caprone by announcing that when the mods found out who the thieves were, those individuals would be punished and banned from the Sultanate. Caprone suddenly admitted his crimes, but argued that Lewis was not involved in any way and that he had tricked him into laundering the stolen items. He indeed gave Lewis the shulkers with the stuff of Kahuna, but explained several times that Lewis had no knowledge that the stuff in the shulkers actually belonged to Kahuna. After more investigation, Lewis admitted to hiding the stuff underneath the city of Volkatsi, but emphasized many times that he'd been tricked by Caprone. Because of the severity of the accusation and the inconclusivity of the evidence, the case against Lewis is highly controversial. Some say that Lewis just tried to defend his friend, others are accusing him of being the head of the operation, and another theory is that Lewis simply had no knowledge at all about the stuff being stolen. The trial against Caprone took place on August 24, 2021, and Caprone was found guilty. His punishment was a public execution in the Sultanate, which took place on the 25th. From the time of writing, it is unclear what will happen to Lewis. The truth of the matter is that we may never know what happened, but due to the lack of a conviction, Lewis is guaranteed to still be part of the RBC channel for the time being. We hope that every nation who has been struck by mass theft will receive justice and that the robbers will get banned. Border changes coming up after this, there's a big event that must be mentioned independently, the Dissolution of the Forge. On the 23rd, one of the biggest nations in Eldham dissolved into multiple provinces after the Grand Republic of Oceanum got independence with a popular vote. This not only meant that one of the biggest Forge territories was now independent, it prompted other regions to vie for independence, resulting in the collapse and dissolution of the nation entirely. Forge was formed in hopes of creating a safe environment for nations who were under threat and facing strife. We grew to the size we did without ever fighting a single war, doing everything through diplomacy. The constituent regions within the Forge were always told they were free to leave at any time, as again, we were only there to help. In recent weeks, many of the regions decided to take their leave and form their own nations. The Forge was no longer needed, so we disbanded and gave them all independence at once. This in turn gives me and RaphusG, my co-leader, time to focus on developing our home, Zumazi. We are still here, and Dynamo still lives. The ever-spinning cog marches on, and we shall not stop. Quote from Karl Marx, one of the leaders of the Forge, now leader of the Azumazi. This marked the independence of Helheim, Eleanor, Veracrium, Pontificate, Oceanum, and Wolfenburg. Luckily, due to the formation of the Anvil Concordat and interference from outside to preserve stability, there are no power vacuums of major concern, as seen in the case of Regnum Drakes. One can only wonder what the future may hold for the now independent nations. Could it be war, or could it be peace? Only time will tell. Now, the last topic I'll mention before the border changes is a mistake that we had made relating to Titania. Instead of many nations combining into Titania, there was an alliance called Erin that had all of the same colors but were still independent nations, not in Titania. The mistake may have been made when, for some reason, Titania's name on the map was bigger in comparison to the other nations in the alliances, thus leading people to believe they had all been combined.
Before we start, we'd like to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Raid Shadowlet. I'm kidding. Anyways, welcome to Big Kahuna's Map Updates. Today's episode is actually sponsored by the adverts you can purchase on our Discord server. Link is in the description. Today's advert is about the city called Arikshamilam. The city is offering free housing and gear for new players and many types of freedom. If you want to join the city, hit this man up on Discord. Now, that this is clear, we will start with the actual border changes. First off, as we already told you, we can see that the Forge has dissolved. You can see the actual borders from how they are today right on the site. Next up, Titania is now marked as Uraka on the map. And after doing some investigation, we found out the peoples of Uraka and Titania and Inja have all united under the Imperial House of Aurelian of the Iraqi Imperium. Merging with the Iraqi government in structure and culture, aspects of all three governments were merged and added to the existing Iraqi structure. Next, you can see that a bunch of new nations have been formed. The first of those is the Kingdom of Balsadir, which was once located in Rudorviv. Second, you can see that a very small nation called Lablantis appeared right next to Arium Solas. Our sources tell us that Lablantis purchased this land and has a military defense guaranteed by Arium Solas. The last nation we find on the map is called Nova Regina, which was once under the control of Tetra. Nations who rename themselves or have at least a new name according to the map are Mugan, which is now called Catania, and according to the map also part of Iring. But last but not least is Tyr, which is now called Solsgard. If we somehow made any mistake in this board or change part, again, we would like to hear about this in the comments. Thank you, see you next week.